There's no doubt about it, the BLON BL-03 was a massive hit. Perhaps to some extent we could even say that it gained somewhat of a cult following. Unfortunately, whenever a company or product reaches that level of success and accolade, it means that the bar has been set extremely high, and as a result any subsequent products that may follow are usually met with a heightened sense of scrutiny. So then, the BL-05 is the model set to follow the 03, but is it destined to simply fade away into the shadow of the 03? At first glance, it's immediately obvious that the BL-05 is quite a bit different to the BL-03. Whilst we still get a metal housing and even the cable seems to be identical, there are a number of design changes on offer here. The overall shape and certain design cues look somewhat similar to the Phantom line of premium wireless speakers. The gold trimming along with the silver metal color makes the BL-05 look perhaps a bit more premium than what the price tag would suggest. Compared to the BL-03, the 05 has a seemingly more intricate design, one which has resulted in a very particular improvement over the 03. If I think back to my review of the 03 along with numerous other reviews which can be found online, the most common issue had to do with the fit. Whilst the 03 wasn't uncomfortable per se, it just didn't sit very securely in the ear, which meant that the ear tips couldn't maintain a proper seal, and thus it was difficult to just sit back and listen to the music without having to readjust them every now and then. I'm happy to report that the BL-05 avoids this issue completely. Provided that you use the correct size of ear tips for your specific ears, the new housing design allows for the nozzle to just sit in the ear and stay there. And perhaps better yet is that this has been accomplished without making it uncomfortable to wear for long periods of time. Perhaps the only issue here is that because the surface finishing is so shiny, this sometimes does show fingerprints and other oily residues fairly quickly. This may also mean that scuff marks and other signs of wear could become very obvious over slightly longer periods of use. One thing which hasn't changed is the cable, as we're getting the same generic cable as on the BL-03, and so it suffers from the same issue of being prone to getting a bit tangled up with itself. It's not terrible, but something a bit more premium certainly would be appreciated. As far as the sound is concerned, the BL-03 has become somewhat of a default recommendation for pretty much anyone who wants a good sounding pair of IEMs without having to spend more than about $50. Heck, in some cases it could even be the best value out there for under $100. Given that, the BL-05 had some pretty big shoes to fill, considering that it's a follow-up to the 03 rather than a replacement. So surely the BL-05 ought to be better, right? Well, let's take a look at the response graph. As was the case with the 03, the 05 does favor the bass region, but much less so than what the 03 did. Generally speaking, it appears to be reasonably well balanced to some extent, whereas the introduction of some aftermarket ear tips can alter the sound slightly to offer a seemingly more subdued and warmer signature. Just looking at the graph, it's not immediately obvious that there's a little bit of a problem here, and to see what I'm talking about, we need to look at the graph of the 03. As mentioned before, the 05 does favor the bass region a lot less than what the 03 does, but it also adds in a peak at just beyond 2 kHz, as well as a higher peak in the upper treble. Those factors combined mean that the 05 sounds quite a bit different to what the 03 does. Unfortunately, the smooth and organic quality of the 03 has been replaced by something quite a bit more forward and aggressive. That's okay if what you want is something more forward and aggressive, but I feel the very essence of what made the 03 so popular is completely lost with the 05. The 03 was by no means perfect, not even close, but what we have in the 05 seems to be an overcorrection. The bass has been reeled in to what I think is a good level, but instead of becoming more neutral overall whilst retaining that organic smoothness, instead we are given something that seems to go in the opposite direction. I think it would come as no surprise then that the 05 just doesn't hold the same value as the 03 did, especially considering that it also costs slightly more. Yes, the issue of the fit has been addressed and corrected in a phenomenal fashion, but a subpar sound signature is just never going to sound great, regardless of how comfortable the IEM is. It's a real shame because there was just so much potential here. Heck, if the signature of the 03 was left exactly as it is and then slapped into the housing of this new design, that would have immediately made the 05 a complete and utter runaway success. Don't get me wrong, I obviously couldn't even begin to expect the best of everything at this price point, but I am disappointed that the 05 doesn't perform at least as good as the 03 did. Again, this is simply my experience, and yours may very well be completely different. You might compare the 03 or any other IEM for that matter, and the 05 might hit that perfect Goldilocks sweet spot for you. If that is the case, that's great, and I hope you enjoy them for many more years to come. But for me, the 03 was always going to be a tough act to follow, so maybe a true objective sonic improvement will be realized in the form of an 07 or maybe an 09. As it stands, the 05 just doesn't offer me a sound signature which I could prefer or recommend over the BL-03. Well, that's it for this review. Thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, hit that like button and do consider subscribing. That's all from me for now, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.